Hello, welcome to History 101 Review Test 2, Summer of 2026. This is the Test 2 or the final, depending on how you like to call it. The first question we want to focus on is analyze, describe, trace the development of American nationalism or culture. That is Lecture 10. We'll pull up and go to it. And so the first thing is what we're looking for, or what I'm looking for. You may be looking for something different. So, what I'm looking for is we want to know or understand where American culture developed, its origins, what it was, how it's defined. And so that's most of that answer will come from your study of Lecture 10 and that Lecture 10 page. Okay. And so the first thing is you want to make sure we discuss the theme. What is the theme? Okay. When we describe when we discuss or describe the development of American nationalism, what we're saying is, the American Revolution created a new country, right? The United States of America. And so you have this cultural idea that, well, we're no longer British. We're no longer in the British Empire. What are we? We're American. Well, what's an American? And so the late 18th, after the American Revolution, the 19th century, you have Americans going, well, what makes us not British? What makes us not European? What is American culture? And so you see this idea developing. Society also, during the course of the 19th century, we also see this idea that somebody from America identified more with the nation, as this slide says. I'm American, not I'm Virginian, or I'm from Massachusetts, or from Georgia. I'm an American. And just like think about when you go abroad. What do you say? I'm American, right? Now, if you live in Las Vegas like we do, we could probably say Las Vegas and get away with it, right? Because Las Vegas is a world-renowned city. But, let's say, like if we were from Pahrump, right? I'm from Pahrump, Nevada. Well, where is that, right? So it's just easier, we identify with our nation. I'm American, right? And so that's kind of the first thing we want to talk about is, what is the idea? Why do you need to create American culture, right? Then we want to make sure we discuss the origins, and I have it outlined here. What's the cultural genesis? Meaning, 19th century Americans, they looked around and they said, okay, well, where did Americans begin? Who were the first Americans, right? And so they looked back at their past, the history, and they decided that those Puritan New Englanders in the early 1600s, Plymouth Colony, the first Thanksgiving, Plymouth Colony, the Pilgrims, they decided that those separatist Puritans, Plymouth Colony, the Pilgrims, they are the first Americans. And so for 19th century Americans, you're looking back and you're picking a people that you think symbolizes the virtues of your nation. And what do we call it today? The Puritan work ethic, Puritan morality, English way of life. And so we still kind of have those terms. In a previous lecture, if you remember, and you can go back and use it, remember in the lecture page on New England, 3, I think, I had an article for you to read, The Significance of Puritanism in American History. That can be used here as well, right? So why late 18th, early 19th century Americans, they look at the past and they're trying to answer the question, who? Who were the first Americans? They look back and go, okay, well, and they picked those Puritan New Englanders because those separatist Puritans in Plymouth Colony, they symbolized the values that we would like to hold as Americans. Okay. The religious culture is Protestant Christianity. Calvinism is the predominant theology. I mean, so when you go to colonial America and you study the 1600s and the 1700s, Protestant Christianity is the cultural religion. Most people are that. Most American churches, at least at the time, had some strain of Calvinism. So it's also called Reformed theology. So a lot of Americans by theology were Calvinists and were Reformed theology. So that's why it's important to study. If you're wondering why in that previous lecture too, I think, students go, why do you bore us with Calvinism, Lord? It is extremely foundational cultural point or understanding for most Americans in colonial America. Okay. And then the next thing is kind of that really helps develop American culture in the early 19th century is, for you and me today, we call the greatest generation the World War II generation that fought World War II, right? Named after the book by Tom Brokaw, The Greatest Generation. Well, for early 19th century Americans, and indeed all 19th century Americans, the greatest generation was the Revolutionary War generation, the people that lived and fought during the American Revolution and the 1780s and the Revolution, the Constitution period, the creation of our nation. And so it's a little bit of an exaggeration to say that 19th century America worshipped the Revolutionary War generation, but not by much. It's a little bit of hyperbole, but not by much. The greatest generation for 19th century Americans was that Revolutionary War generation. A lot of the patriotic stories that we know, quote unquote, know about the American Revolution come from 19th century authors writing later. Right, so the most famous one being what? Washington and the Cherry Tree. And so 19th century Americans, the Revolutionary War generation, held all the virtues that an American should hold. Honesty, hard work, work ethic, integrity, honesty, justice, fair dealing, generally egalitarian, that idea. Okay. So, what is the box? Okay, so what is the definition of American for 19th century Americans? Okay. When you study American history, there's kind of two threads. There's kind of two threads of what defines an American. And even back then, even back then, 19th century, is being an American holding a set of ideals that anyone can hold, a set of values and ideals, truth, justice, and the American way. Life, liberty, and property, inalienable rights of life, liberty, and property. Or is it more demographically based? And so both of those, and even today, both of those definitions exist today, and we argue about it. Today, even we still argue about it. But in the 19th century, you had that argument too. There were some that held more of the ideals, and regardless of whether it was more demographically related or idyllic, what is the majority culture that develops in the 19th century? It's Northern and Western European, specifically English, because that's the predominant group, the predominant ethnic group. We were British colonies. We were in the British Empire. We were British, okay, and so the majority culture is going to be English specifically, Northern Western European, English specifically, and then Protestant religiously. So that kind of is a box. One way to generally understand colonial America in some ways in 19th century America is how well you were treated sometimes depended on how well you hit that box. How Northern and Western European can you be and how Protestant can you be? And there's multiple examples. For example, you go, Mr. Bills, why are the Irish bagged on so much? I mean, there are, the sexy topic is obviously Africans were slaves. That's the predominant topic. There were some Irish people that weren't just indentured servants. They were slaves too. The Irish kind of always looked down upon in American history. 19th century America was pretty anti-Irish. Um, and so you go, Mr. Bills, they're Western European. I mean, in fact, Ireland is even more Western European geographically than England, right? It's farther to the west. What's the problem? They're Catholic, right? And so Northern Western European and Protestant. Okay. And so you can hit that mark. How American can you be? One thing I like to go over with my students to help them understand the 19th century is this idea of assimilation. Okay. In the 19th century, and you still see it today too, how much should you assimilate? How much of the old country should you abandon? Okay. For 19th century America, you were to abandon your old country, your old culture. You were to assimilate. You were to become American. Okay. So 19th century America would completely reject this idea of hyphenating like we do today. There's a famous Theodore Roosevelt quote in the early 1900s, decrying the use of hyphenated Americans. You're American. You're American. Okay. And so 19th century Americans mostly would reject our current popular trend of everyone's, I am European American. I am, whatever. 19th century America would find that wrong. You come here, you become American. You hit that box. You get as close to the cultural box as you can. Western, Northern European, and Protestant. And so, speaking English, believing in constitutional law, participating in American politics, loving America, okay, loving McDonald's, hating soccer, okay, pun intended, I guess, for the current World Cup, but anyways, so defining an American, the idea was to assimilate. You had to assimilate. You were to become American, okay. And one example I give in my class on campus, it's outside of 101, but it helps explain what I'm saying. The example is that in 1883, Congress passed a law called the Chinese Exclusion Act. What did the Chinese Exclusion Act do? It banned Chinese immigration temporarily. A later act made it permanent. And so you go, well, why? Why? Because American culture in 1883, people in Congress, culturally American, had deemed Chinese people as the least assimilatable. In other words, they cannot become American. Their culture is so alien, so foreign. There's no way for them to become American. Okay. And so what do? You say, well, you can't be here. You're not assimilatable. You can't become American. Okay? And so, and you go, why not a Mexican Exclusion Act? Because Mexicans are in part European. They're Spanish. So, in part, in other words, they can become American. The argument being they're part Spanish. You watch Mexican TV shows. There's Mexican citizens on TV shows that are whiter than I am. They're lighter skinned than I am. And so, why? Spanish blood. And so, why was there a Mexican Exclusion Act? Well, one, they're labor, they work, but two, they're partly European. They can become American, right? And you go, well, what about Africans? One, they're the labor, so you're not going to get rid of your labor. But two, even even there's the idea that they can become American in some way. You know, this idea that even though they're the labor class, they can become American in some way. They can be, or as 19th century people would say, become civilized, or can you civilize them, right? And so, you go, well, people hate the Irish so much. Why is there an Irish exclusion act? Because the Irish are at least European. They're also the labor too. They're also the labor class too. But um, they, but you get it. But Chinese were a labor class too. But you get it. The least assimilatable. Mexicans can assimilate. Africans can assimilate. Irish people can assimilate. They can become American in some way. The Chinese population cannot, absolutely. So what do? You pass the Chinese Exclusion Act. So that kind of demonstrates what I'm talking about, even though it's a 102, History 102 topic. It kind of, what I mean is you have American cultures developed, and so how American are you? Well, how well can you fit the box? And I mean, it's not 100%, but generally how well you were treated was generally how well you could hit that box. Northern Western European, specifically English and Protestant. Right? Anyway, you can go through the rest of this lecture, but you have a graph you can talk about. I mean, between 1820 and 1860, nearly 40% of people from other countries were from Ireland. I mean, that's a lot of Irish people. So anyways, you go over, and then what you do is, on the test, there's political nationalism, urbanization, the Industrial Revolution. Go through it with Transportation Revolution. You go through and you kind of pick a couple of topics to expand upon. How did the Transportation Revolution develop American culture? What is political nationalism? What is, that Transportation Revolution is long. Anyway, you have different kinds of political, economic, social, cultural. How did they all, help develop American culture? Okay. The second question on test 2 or the final, however you want to call it, describe 3 religious churches revivals that came out of the Second Great Awakening. You can talk about pastors too. You can talk about preachers too. So I could just do that now, I guess. It can be religions, churches, people, about the Second Great Awakening. Okay. And so that's 2. So go into the module section. That is that massive lecture, right? In week 7, lecture 12, religion and reform. Okay. I'm not gonna, I mean, it would, to go over this lecture would completely like as if I taught it in class would be a couple hours or several 40-minute videos. So I can't do that. Well, I can, I guess, but I'm not going to. But what you do is here, you go to lecture 12, okay, and you review the material. I talk about people, I talk about churches, review them, pick your favorites, and, expand upon them. And here I have document is still processing. That is not good. While it's doing that, I'll give it a minute. But so what you'll do is, as you read through it, I talk about all kinds of churches, different religions, different religious. I talk about different types of theology. I talk about specific people. You are just picked through the whole universe. If there's somebody about the Second Great Awakening that I don't talk about, I mean, you can, through your own study, you can talk about them too. Okay. And so, as you're studying here, you're talking about specific people, right? Or churches, or religions, or theology. And so, the beginning of this is where I talk about, all the stuff. You can talk about millennialism if you want, because that's a theological doctrine or a theological idea, concept. So if you want to focus on theological ideas, millennialism, right? Millennialism, it's like it's not, you know, the idea that Jesus Christ is returning in a second coming in glory to destroy the wicked and usher in 1,000 years of peace when he will reign personally on the earth. That's a common, regular, normal Christian idea. You put 10 Christians in a room and ask, "Is Jesus coming back?" Well, yeah. I mean, that's a basic Christian belief, right? Millennialism is way more than that. It's Christ is coming now, immediately. You have to prepare for it. You get it? It's not a just sit back, oh yeah, whatever. It's no, he's coming now. You have to prepare yourself for his coming because it's today, tomorrow, October 15th. The Millerites, October 15th, 1844. Or 3. It's 1843 or 4. Anyways. And so you can talk about that. If you want to talk about specific groups, you talk about Millerites. So it's Seventh-day Adventists. Talk about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, more commonly known as Mormons. Jehovah's Witnesses is more out. It's more of it's a 102, but a lot of Jehovah's Witness theology fits into the Second Great Awakening, even though they mainly get started after the Civil War. I wouldn't really talk about them unless you really want to, because they're a little outside of our, only because they're just outside of our period. If you personally are a Jehovah's Witness and you want to talk about them, that's fine. You know, if you really are desperate to, you can do it. But they're technically outside of our class period. They're after the Civil War. You can talk about origins. Talk about Timothy Dwight, preacher. If you want to talk religions, Unitarians, you have a whole, and you look things up. You're supposed to, some of the students, you're supposed to do your own personal study. That's part of this. Is go and study more about the person. That's why the TEDs I only say 3, because talk about the entire Second Great Awakening in 250 words. No, I mean it's going to be very, very surface. So that's why I just say just 3 things, so that you can what? You can go to Google and ask. Go to Google and ask. In my day when I was a kid, obviously we'd go to the library, check out a book. I would love if you did that. If you want to let me know that you did that, that'd be fantastic. Mr. Beal actually physically got up, went to a library, got a book on the topic and read it. Or skimmed it at least. At least skim it. Anyways. If you want to tell me, excellent. Because I assume most people are just, they Google, and now in this day and age of AI, ChatGPT, but yeah, do some of your own personal study on these topics, and you'll develop an answer. 10 revivals, again, if you want to study what's the theology behind tent revivals, right? Campfire revivals and tent revivals, today we call them, Bible camp. They're emotional. They're light on the theology, right? I'm not putting out theology students. Most of you aren't educated enough to really get it anyways, right? So it's supposed to be an emotional, spiritual experience. Remember, a lot of people on the frontier, you're farmers. You live on the frontier. Farm work is a boring, hard life, right? So, church better not be boring, right? So about, just skimming through, okay, here you go. Ding, 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 ding. Here you go. Talk about one of these guys, right? I don't want to turn this into a 3-hour lecture where I talk about everything, but, Martin W. Stone, you can talk about restorationism, you can talk about non-traditional religious beliefs, right? So, go through here, and you pick your Charles Grandison, if you want to talk about Charles Grandison Finney. So what you do, you just go through new churches section. There you go. Pick something to talk about. Mr. Bills, I want to talk about black churches. Excellent. There you go. I have a section. You talk about Mormons. It always kills me. I always scare students. The semesters I don't say that I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, like a lot of students will do it. Semesters where I say I am a member of the Church of Christ of Latter-day Saints, no one touches. Anyways, I hope at least a few of you will talk about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If you want to study it and you want good answers, feel free to email me. I'll help you out. So, but it is something I've noticed in 26 years of teaching college. Semesters where I don't say it, I get a good chunk. It's hilarious. I say, yes, I remember Jersey Regularly. This is it. Like, and the room goes dead silent. The room goes dead silent too. Like, anyway, it's kind of funny. It's funny to watch. So, you can have with shakers. Anyway, you can have shakers. That's cool. Okay, black churches. If you want to talk about African American or black churches, here you go. Okay, we talk about ministers, right? Independent black churches. So a minister, just pick. So same thing, Absalom Jones. Okay, so I mean, I give you in this lecture, for, I don't know, 30 items. Just pick 3. Focus on them. Do your own personal study about them. Okay. And so there's that. Here, let me just go back to the module section real quick. And so that is number 2. You're like, Mr. Mills, why don't you pause it so it's a shorter video instead of us watching you go back to the question. Define manifest destiny. Okay, so in that lecture, we define manifest destiny. Then I talk about Texas and Oregon, and the Mexican-American War. I probably should have added that too, but Texas, Oregon, Mexican-American War, and you talk about Texas, Oregon. You pick one, and then the last paragraph talk about the Mexican-American War. Okay, So anyway, so the Mexican-American War should be a part of your answer too. Let's go to the lecture. So the American West. So what I usually expect from students is this, okay? Paragraph 1. Define manifest destiny. Manifest destiny is a primary document term. It was used at the time to describe America's destiny. You can mention John O.L. Sullivan. Okay. John L. O. Sullivan. You can mention him if you'd like. It's a primary document term. One way to help if you're confused about the term manifest destiny, keep this in mind. So you and I, 21st century English speakers, we use the word manifest for different things than the 19th century. Instead of manifest, as understood in the 19th century, you and I, we use a different word, the word obvious. Okay? So, 19th century Americans, if the choice was between using the word obvious and manifest, they picked manifest, meaning obvious, right? You and I today, 20th, 21st century English speakers, we like the word obvious, obviously. We like the word obvious. You're like, no. Anyways, we like the word obvious, and so we use that. Okay. So that may help you make sense. What is America's obvious destiny? Okay. We use the word manifest for other things, like a ship's manifest and stuff like that. If something's obvious, we say it's obvious, right? So it's your obvious destiny, okay? And you want to make sure you hit on 3 ideas, okay? Number 1, it's your responsibility to go west. You are supposed to go west, right? What do you take with you? Democracy, okay? American political culture, okay? You get it? Ultimately, what do you take west? Civilization or culture, American culture. You're supposed to take democracy west. You're supposed to civilize the West. You're supposed to tame and civilize the West. The West is wild and uncivilized, filled with barbarians and savages. Okay. And then, hot weather. But you go west, okay, you're taming the West. You're civilizing the West. Okay. The Romans would use the word barbarians. 19th century Americans would say savages. Okay. So, look at your language. And the Roman Empire, Romans, ancient Romans, anyone not Roman, they called barbarian, right? You're either a Roman or a barbarian, right? 18th and 19th century America or colonial America, 19th century America, savages. You're not civilized. You're a savage. Okay. And so there's Native American tribes, the Indians. They're savage and wild. So what are you taking west with you? You're taming the West. Not just culturally, but physically, right? What are you doing out west? You're irrigating. You're conserving the water to irrigate, right? You're farming. What are you doing to adapt? Not adapt to the region, but making the region adapt to you, right? We live in Las Vegas, but half of us have green lawns. I mean, it doesn't rain very much here, right? The Bellagio must have its water show, Mr. Mills. Okay. And so, so Manifest Destiny, you're bringing American democracy, American political culture. You're bringing civilization. You're civilizing the West, taming the West. Not just physically, nature. You get it? You're civilizing nature. You're civilizing people and nature, right? You're creating America. You're making it become America. And 3, Protestant Christianity. I don't know why. When I revised this lecture last time, I dropped Protestant. I don't know why. I shouldn't have. It's wrong for me to do so. Protestant Christianity. So on the TED, make sure you say Protestant Christianity. Okay? The right flavors. Not enough to be Christian. Catholics are Christian. Mormons are Christian. Why do we like them? Because they're not Protestant. Okay? So you're taking west the correct American flavor of religion. American Protestantism. Okay. Those Mexicans need to be converted. Those Mormons need to be converted. And they're going to be starting. Right? They need to be converted too. Okay. You're bringing democracy. You're bringing civilization. You're bringing your Protestant Christianity. Okay. You're civilizing the West. You're turning the West into America. Right. So that'll be your first paragraph. You're defining Manifest Destiny. Oh, so there is a religious reason here. So I do want you to note the religious reason. You've been blessed with the continent. Okay. You have been, by the grace of God, you've been given the continent. You have a responsibility to go west. The other thing I want you to notice is the nobility of it. Notice how we're going west for land and gold. Those surreals, those aren't noble reasons. Those aren't. Yeah, you get it. So I also want you to notice the popular, not the popular, the noble reasons. You're focusing on the positive reasons, the noble reasons. If we get land and gold, that's just gravy. That is just gravy. Mr. Hill, just gravy. Okay. Land and gold. No. Anyway, and so that's that. Okay, next. So again, I talk about Oregon in the lecture. I talk about Texas. Pick one or the other, Oregon and Texas. So that'll be your next part. So you're defining Manifest Destiny. You pick Texas or Oregon. Talk about them. I mean, I'm not going to spend 40. This is a Texas and Oregon in class, like good hour, 40 minutes to an hour, maybe. I don't know. So you talk about either one, right? Your last paragraph is the Mexican-American War. Okay. Your last paragraph is the Mexican-American War. Historians generally argue that Mr. Bills, what is the symbol of what is the symbol of Manifest Destiny? What is the best example of Manifest Destiny? What symbolizes manifest destiny. The Mexican-American War. Okay. The Mexican-American War is a manifest destiny war. It's because of it. Okay. In other words, if you didn't want the West, if you didn't feel and think that God had blessed you with the continent, you probably wouldn't have gone to war with Mexico. Okay. That's the idea here. All right. So, mention the Mexican-American War. You are fighting for manifest destiny. It's interesting, right? The American frontier is west. The Mexican frontier, the frontera, is what? North, right? The frontera is north for Mexico. It's west for Americans. What is the arena? The American West, right? States west, places west of the Rocky Mountains, right? And so you're both fighting for that. So you go over, talk about the Mexican-American War. Talk about it a little bit, right? And then you can do a concluding idea of, like this idea of destiny. America as a nation with a mission. America with a destiny. Okay. And so there's that. So hopefully that helped. Oh. Next question. Analyze the Compromise of 1850, Blaine, Kansas, and the Dred Scott decision, and how they contributed to deepening sectional conflict in the 1850s. So you want to focus on three things: Compromise of 1850, Blaine, Kansas, and the Dred Scott decision. Okay, a paragraph each, if you will, and then a concluding paragraph of how did these three things. Well, not things, events. Comrade of 1850, Blaine, Kansas, and the Dred Scott decision. How they contributed. And so, people, I don't think students, I don't think you sometimes realize. I mean, think about this, people. Okay, think about this. 1849. Okay. 1849, you just defeated Mexico in war and got the continent. You get it? Woo! Woo! A major patriotic victory. You had been blessed with the continent. You achieved your destiny. You are the land from sea to shining sea. Okay. 1849. Okay. A patriotic high point. Okay. You achieved your destiny. Okay. You beat Mexico in a war. And you won. And you got the continent. You've been blessed with the continent. You were blessed with victory. Yeah. 1849. 11 years later, April of 1861, 7 states have left the Union. Shooting has started, and 4 more states are about to leave the Union. 11 years, people. 11 years, people. Okay. Something happened. You got it? How do you go? That's why this 1850s, it's so important to study the 1850s. Okay. You get it? Well, you may not, I don't think, sometimes you don't realize it. We just jump to we go from the Mexican-American War to the Civil War and don't really think about it. People think something happened. Just have a nation go from a patriotic high point of winning a war and getting a continent and achieving your manifest destiny to 11 years later, states are leaving and shooting. Okay. And shooting has started. Okay. This lecture, that's why this idea is extremely important. You want another little bit of evidence? Go check out in the library 10 books on the Civil War. Just a general Civil War history. Like Jane McPherson's Battle Cry of Freedom. That's the most famous one. Go read Jane McPherson's Battle Cry of Freedom. Mr. Bills, where do you get a lot of your lecture notes and ideas from how you think about the era? Battle Cry of Freedom, Jane McPherson. That's like the number one. But go check out 10 books on the Civil War. Guess when they all start? They don't start in 1860 and 61. They start in 1848 at the end of the Mexican-American War. Okay? Because to understand the Civil War, you have to know what unraveled. Something unraveled. You went from a patriotic high point. Of winning a war and getting a continent and achieving your manifest destiny that God has blessed you with, to 11 years later, states are leaving the Union and people are shooting each other. Okay? So that's why it's important. That's why it's important to study the 1850s. Something unraveled badly. Okay? Something came apart. Something went off the rails. Okay? Something went off the rails. Okay? So anyways, so as you go through here, again, I don't want to turn this review into just me lecturing for 3 hours. Number one, in the page, you have a video lecture. Go through my YouTube channel. I have video lectures on all this, so, where am I? And so, here we go, sorry. Okay, so, sectionalism. So it's a big lecture, but just focus on 3 things. So, Congress of 1850, right? You review that section, study it, read it in the ebook, study it on your own, watch my videos on it. I just realized my hair's kind of messed up. Anyways, Comrades of 1850, right? California is a free state. Utah and New Mexico get to pick. Popular sovereignty. No slave trade in D.C. and a very strong fugitive slave law. There have been fugitive slave laws since the beginning. And I mean, there's a fugitive slave clause in the U.S. Constitution. Okay. Congress in the northern states, federal government generally ignored fugitive slave laws. They generally didn't, I mean, southern slave catchers could come north and look, but you weren't going to get a ton of help. Okay. The federal fugitive slave law is going to put some teeth in that baby. It's going to commit the federal government to helping return slaves back south. Okay. And remember, this is by the 1840s, by 1850, the northern states, anti-slavery. No slave trade no slavery out west. Definitely not in the north. No slavery out west. That is the baseline, common, normal opinion in the north. Yeah, the anti-slavery. Okay. In the north, in 1850, a majority, probably more than 50%, Georgia can have all the slaves at once. Okay. But you can't go west and you can't go north. And so you get it. Think about the conflict there. A northern society that is culturally, politically, morally set on anti-slavery. No slavery out west. Okay. Definitely not in the north, but no slavery out west. Right? Most northerners aren't attacking slavery in Louisiana or slavery in Alabama. That's fine. You do you. Okay. But you can't, you just can't go elsewhere. You can't go to New York. You can't go to Utah territory. You can't go to California. Right? So think about how that's going to split things up. No slave trade in D.C. Okay. By 1850, for a lot of Southern elite, slave owners, politicians, even the thought of restricting slavery in any way would send them into a conniption. So this is a big deal, right? Popular sovereignty. What is popular sovereignty, people? Western territories get to pick whether they want slavery or not. Okay. Remember, the North is culturally and politically, no slavery out west is a common opinion in the North. It's like mainstream, regular political opinion. No slavery out west. What does popular sovereignty do? It allows the possibility of slavery being out west. And so, I'll let you contemplate what Northerners think of that. California is a free state. You're like, so what? Notice how, unlike the Comrades of 1820, there's no second slave state. to balance things out. California permanently will alter the number of states to balance. There are now more free states than slave states. So there's no, you get it? So if you're a Southern slave owner, you have an interest in slavery expanding or being maintained, notice what's happening here, right? You know, eventually it's going to be what? It's going to be a Northern free union, right? So anyway, so that's just kind of something you want to talk about. Reignite slavery, the political issue. The Fugitive Slave Act, I mean, I talked a little bit about it. You can go through here. I mean, it sets off the North. Okay, so you can go through the lecture here. Blaming Kansas is the next one, right? Kansas Territory is created. What does Congress say? Kansas is north of the Missouri Compromise line. Kansas is north of the Missouri Compromise line from the Compromise of 1820. What does Congress say in 1854? Kansas Territory can pick popular sovereignty. Right. There you go, popular sovereignty. So what are you going to have? You're going to have pro-slavery and anti-slavery groups racing to Kansas to make it for your slave, depending on who has more voters. What do you people think is going to happen? What do you people think is going to happen? I mean, shooting starts. Bleeding Kansas, right? So you go through and talk about that. You do want to make sure you mention this. This is a big point. Okay? 1858, Kansas sends a state constitution to Congress for approval to become a state. It's a pro-slavery constitution. If the Lecompton Constitution had passed, Kansas would have been a slave state in 1858. It would have balanced that. It would have balanced out the states. It does not pass. The first time in U.S. history up to this point that a state applies for statehood a territory applies for statehood and it doesn't make it. That is significant, people. Something is unraveled. Okay. So there you have that. Dred Scott. The beating, tariffs. You want to make sure you know the tariff issue for the next question, right? On slavery and so that there are tariff issues as well. Free Soil Party. Okay, down to the Whig Party. Birth of the Republican Party. Okay, Dred Scott. So go over Dred Scott. I went into great detail on it, right? I mean, I went through the case. I went through, what is significance? What is a political firestorm? Okay. Why might the North not be happy with that decision? Right? And so, anyway, so you just go over that. Focus on those three things, those three topics and issues, okay? Dred Scott, what did the court say? The court said that Congress and states cannot regulate slavery. It is an inherent right. Life, liberty, and property is an inherent inalienable right of a U.S. citizen. Okay? And so, what's the clause in the U.S. Constitution? A citizen of one state has the same rights in the several states. Meaning, if I'm a citizen in Georgia, I have the same rights in Georgia that I do. I have the same rights in New York and Massachusetts that I have in Georgia. I have the same rights out in Kansas that I have in Georgia. Que problema. I think I have a constitutional right to own property. I just happen to define black people as property. You got it? I mean, so it's just because of this idea of what is property. Okay? And can you restrict that property right? Okay. The northern states have been saying yes for decades, right? The northern colonies and states abolished slavery over time. Kansas, the Missouri Compromise was trying to get out. Missouri Compromise. Go back to the 1780s. Northwest Land Ordinance Act. Congress said what? No slavery in Northwest. So for decades, the North and the federal government have been regulating slavery. Okay. The Dred Scott decision brings up that important question, and the court says what? The court says, well, the U.S. Constitution protects a citizen's property rights. The fact that half the country thinks black people are property is irrelevant. Okay. So there you go. I mean, so I'll let you contemplate. You get it? Remember, the U.S., the normal public opinion, common in the North in 1857, no slavery out West. Definitely not in the North, and no slavery out West. What does the court say in Dred Scott? Congress and states can't regulate slavery in that way. They cannot tell a citizen in Georgia that you do not have the same property rights in New York and Iowa and Kansas that you do in Georgia. Okay. So, right. So there you have it. So you can see how these are causing an unraveling here. Okay. The last question. Edit this. Okay, so analyze the different issues that led to the Civil War. The issues, tariff issues, economic sectionalism, cultural and constitutional issues, and slavery. There's many ways you can approach this. I mean, there's many ways you can do this. And like when I do this lecture in class, I mean, it's a good, crap. So I don't know. I talk about it for a while. We talk about slavery and other issues. Let me approach it this way. Okay, let me approach it this way. Think of it as a spectrum. Okay, on one side, now obviously the extreme, kind of the opposing thesis. One thesis today is that slavery is the only cause of the Civil War and nothing else at all ever. Only slavery, only slavery, only slavery. Okay. On the other side, the far other side, is slavery had nothing to do with the Civil War at all. Okay. Here's the issue. They're both wrong. They are both wrong. Okay. If your thesis is, if your opinion, if your academic historical opinion is slavery is the only cause of the Civil War and nothing else ever, only slavery, don't read the primary documents then, because you'll get disappointed. Okay. When you read the primary documents from the era, there are clearly other issues. Okay. There are other issues. There's tariff issues. There's economic factors. The South is, the 11 states that left the Union were worried about becoming an economic colony of the North. They were being shut out of the West economically. They were becoming an economic colony of the North. Tariffs are an issue. Okay. Cultural issues. Okay. Constitutional issues. By 1860, a lot for the Southern political class and even regular Southerners, the North had violated the U.S. Constitution to the point where it didn't exist anymore. The federal government had ripped the U.S. Constitution to shreds. And so they were going to do something about it. They were going to leave the Union. Okay. And so when you study the Civil War, the thesis that slavery had everything to do with this one, nothing, no other issue, the primary documents do not support that. There are other issues. They are discussed. Okay. It just is. Another thing about that. Here's the other issue. If you're in the slavery is the only cause of the Civil War and nothing else, the other problem with that is, well, you better not read these letters and diaries of Civil War soldiers. Let me tell you about my favorite book. You can read this for your your extra credit book if you want. It's one of my favorite books on the Civil War. What They Fought For. Okay? What They Fought For. By James F. McPherson. It's a short book. People, the only reason it's 112 pages is it's physically a small book. I don't know where it is in my library, but I mean, it's a physically small book. It's the only reason it's 112 pages. But guess what? When you read it, at the beginning of the war, I mean, Northern soldiers, the last thing on their mind was, we're going to war to free the slaves. They were preserving the Union. They were fighting the Union. Southerners, people, it's a class issue for Southerners. I apologize for sounding like a Marxist. I'm very anti-communist. I'm very anti-Marxist. So I always feel a little bad when I parrot Marxist historical things, but, anyway, so I apologize. I'm anti-Marxist. I'm anti-communist, anti-Marxist extremely. But when you study this, go read this book. When you study these Southern soldiers, they're poor Southern soldiers, okay? Owning slaves was a rich man's game. Okay. In a previous lecture, if you went through the lecture, you saw it. The price of a healthy adult man in 1850 was $1,000 in that era's money. It would be hundreds of thousands of dollars today. Okay. Owning a slave was expensive. Okay. Rich people owned slaves. Poor people didn't. Okay. And so it would be a class issue for these Southern Confederate soldiers. If you went and you go, hey, poor person, poor white poor white trash. Would you like to go fight a war and die so the rich man can have his rich mansion plantation complete with slaves? They would say hell no. They would say hell no, of course not. If you couch it in Southern culture and honor, they'll go for that. You know, patriotism, defending the South against the evil North. You know, but so anyways, so my point is, you know, for poor Southerners, poor white trash Southern soldiers, Confederate soldiers, and when I'm saying poor white trash, I'm not meaning it in a pejorative way. Just that they're poor. Okay. They're poor. They're the bottom of, they're almost the bottom of Southern society. Black people would be the bottom, but they're almost the bottom of Southern society. The only reason they're not the bottom is they're not black. Okay. And so they're not gonna, they say it in their letters. They're not fighting a war so a rich guy can have slaves. Okay. So you read this book if you want. It's an extremely good book. And this is the other thing. Mr. Bill, I don't want BS. I don't want primary document. Fine. Go read the primary documents. All James McPherson does in this book is quote Civil War soldiers. That's all he does. Constant quotes. You know. So you get it? Mr. Bill, I don't want your BS. I want to know what the primary documents say. Fine. I'm ecstatic about that. Yes. If you think I'm BSing you, I would love nothing more than my history students to actually go read the primary documents. Because why? I'll be honest with you, a lot of professional historians don't go read the primary documents. Okay? A lot of historians today are so filled with their political ideology that they think that's history. They think that's the past. They don't go and actually read. So, you know what I mean? So go, that, you know what I mean? You can say it to my face, Mr. Bills, you're full of BS. I'm going to go read the primary document. Thank you. Thank God. I would love nothing more. I would love nothing more for you to do that. Yes, please. Go forth. Anyways, James McPherson, What They Fought For. So it is a really good book. It's a really good book. I encourage you to read it. Anyways, so that's that point. So that's one side, right? The slavery is the only cause of civil war, nothing else ever. That the primary documents do not support that. Okay. That there are other issues. Okay. Civil War soldiers largely ignored slavery as an issue. Northerners flat out said they're not, you know, Now, well, anyway, I'm about to say something, but I'll say that for what I'm going to go over now. Now, the other side of the spectrum, is this idea, the thesis is slavery had zero, zilch, nada, nothing to do with the Civil War, nothing, slavery had nothing, zero, nothing to do with the Civil War at all. Okay? That's my mother-in-law's point of view. Anyway, I probably shouldn't say that. I'm going to put this on YouTube. But this is popular for some people. Slavery had nothing to do with the Civil War. Okay. Okay, well, go read the primary documents. They're wrong too. Why? Don't read the primary documents. You'll be disappointed. Okay. You will be disappointed. Okay. So same thing with the only slavery and nothing else. The primary documents do not support that. There are other issues. Okay, slavery has nothing to do with the Civil War, and that the primary documents don't support that either. And here's your case in point. I will give you the example, or plural. Okay, fine. Okay. Well, number one. What other issue in the mid-19th century would have caused 7 states to leave the Union and 4 more to leave when shooting started? Okay. Now, you could say tariffs, slavery, tariffs. Those are big issues in the 1850s. Okay. Right. Well, the last time tariff issues became so hot, somebody was going to do something about it. When was that? 1832, South Carolina. What happened? South Carolina buckled the second the federal government said something. Jackson said, I'm sending the army. They buckled. Did any other state join South Carolina? No. You got it. Okay. Tariff issues, well, when you study the lectures and my PowerPoint and the videos, right? Tariff issues in the 1850s were dropping. Okay. So, for historians, why the tariff issues kind of negated a little bit is Congress was finally, after decades, doing what Southerners wanted. Lowering tariff rates. And so, Now, in 1860, what was on the Republican Party platform? When Lincoln and the Republican Party said, what in 1860? If we win, we're raising tariffs. Okay. So your question is, well, Mr. Bills, would that cause 7 states to leave the Union? And then 4 more to leave when shooting started? You can debate that. But, if slavery did not exist, if there weren't other sectional issues, would the Republican Party threat to raise tariff rates if they won in 1860, would that be enough of a threat to cause 7 states to leave the Union and 4 more to leave when shooting started? My personal opinion is no, because 1832, a couple of decades earlier, they didn't. Now, you could say, well, Mr. Bill, that's 20 years ago. 10 years ago, we were patriotically celebrating winning half of Mexico. Right? So there's that debate. So tariffs, when the Civil War started over tariffs, my personal opinion, historically, based on these, is no, probably not. Slavery definitely was a cause, right? Other things, economic sectionalism, right? What were the northern states and the federal government doing? Okay. They were restricting southern economic activity out west. They're trying to restrict slavery out west. You get it? And so, we're becoming an economic colony of the North, which is true. You are becoming an economic colony in the North. But what's part of the economy in the South? Part of the economy in the South is African slave labor. You get it? And so, slavery had nothing to do with the Civil War. It was an economic section of the, well, okay, fine. But what is part of the economy? What Southern cotton planters, what economic activity are you being barred from doing out west? Taking your slaves out west and using them for labor. Okay, you get it? And so, you can say economic sections all you want. Okay, but what's underlying it? Slavery is part of the Southern economy, and it's being restricted from going. In other words, if slavery didn't exist in the South, the federal government probably wouldn't be trying to restrict Southern economic activity out west. You get it? The states' rights, Mr. Bills. States' rights, Mr. Bills. Fine. The Civil War had nothing to do with slavery. It had to do with states' rights, Mr. Bills. Okay, fine. The next question you ask is, what right is being threatened? Ding, 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 ding. What right is being threatened, people? What right is being... The right to own slaves. The right to property. And the fact that I define black people as properties is the issue. Okay, so you get it? For the slavery had nothing to do with the Civil War crowd. The primary documents don't support that because slavery as an issue underlies quite a bit. Okay, economic sectionalism, states' rights issues, violating the Constitution. What is being violated? What is being violated? My right as an American citizen to take my property west. It just so happens that I think black people are property. Ding, 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 ding. So you get it? Slavery underlies, it is a foundational issue. You can't say it had nothing to do with the Civil War. It's a foundational issue. The North is violating the Constitution. What are they violating? A Southerner's right to property. Okay, for some Southerners, they define black people as property. They're making us an economic colony of the North. They're not letting us interact economically out west. Why? Because you want to take your slave labor with you. They're the states' rights. We're fighting for states' rights. What right is being threatened? What right is being threatened? The institution of slavery. Okay. Here's another issue, or another item. For the slavery, for the Mr. Bills, slavery had nothing to do with the Civil War. Mr. Bills, nothing to do with the Civil War. Nothing to do with the Civil War. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. Mr. Bills, slavery had nothing to do with the Civil War. Well, here's the problem. The state of Mississippi in 1860 disagrees with you. You get it? The primary document disagrees with you. Slavery had nothing to do with the Civil War. When Mississippi left the Union in 1860, 61, I can't remember the exact date. December 1860 to February 1861. When the Mississippi State Legislature said, we're leaving the Union, they published a document saying why. Mr. Bills, slavery had nothing to do with the Civil War. Well, Mississippi, the state of Mississippi disagrees with you. Second paragraph. Our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, the greatest material interest of the world. Its labor supplies the product which constitutes by far the largest and most important portions of commerce on the earth. These products are particular to the climate, verging on the tropical regions, and by an imperious law of nature, none but the black race can bear exposure to the tropical sun. These products have become necessities for the world, and a blow at slavery is a blow at the commerce and civilization. That blow has been long aimed at the institution and was at the point of reaching its consummation. There is no choice left to us but submission to the mandates of abolition or dissolution of the Union, whose principles have been subverted to work out our ruin. Okay. That we do not overstate the dangers to our institution. A reference to a few facts will. Then what do they do, people? I mean, Mississippi goes on lists, just like by the way, just like the Declaration of Independence, what do? They list everything that the federal government has done wrong for 80 years. Okay. I mean, so you get it? I mean, so you get it? It is historically inaccurate. It is historically inaccurate to say slavery was the only cause of the Civil War and nothing else. It is historically inaccurate to say slavery had nothing to do with the Civil War. Because why? The primary documents disagree with both. Okay. Mr. Bills, that slavery had nothing to do with the Civil War. The state of Mississippi in 1860 disagreed with you. The people at the time disagreed with you. Who should we go with? And this is my point, Mr. Bills. I mean, you guys. I mean, this is my point. How important are the primary documents, Mr. Bills? So important that if the primary documents disagree with your ideology, your political ideology, your opinion, your point of view, you should change it probably. That's my point. That's how important your historical opinions, your opinions of history should be based on the primary documents. Okay? Not your current Marxist ideology, not your patriotic myth-making, not your woke agenda, not anything. You get it? You should be willing to change your point of view if the primary documents do not support that. Okay? So there's two extremes. And by the way, I mean, it is kind of a culture war thing. People that tend to be politically progressive or left on the political spectrum, they are in the only slavery had to do with the Civil War, nothing else. That's just historically inaccurate. That's just not true. Okay? It's not accurate. It's just isn't. If you think that the primary documents are going to don't read the primary documents, they will disappoint you. People that are politically conservative, especially in the South, tend to go with slavery had nothing to do with the Civil War. The primary documents will upset you as well. You will get very upset. Okay, I just read one to you, people. I just read a primary document to you. The state of Mississippi in 1860 disagrees with your 21st century opinion. We should go with Mississippi. You get it? We should go with Mississippi's 1860 opinion. If you're saying slavery is the only cause of the Civil War and nothing else, Civil War soldiers disagree with you. We should go with what they say. They disagree with you too. Okay. Anyways, so you're gonna go over all those issues. Okay. Analyze all those issues. Tariff, economic, cultural, countries with slavery. Okay. There are multiple issues. Okay. There are multiple factors that led 7 states to leave the Union and then 4 more to leave once the shooting started. Okay. And then here's the other point you might want to bring up, right? You're going, Mr. Bills, I'm shocked. 11 years ago, we were celebrating victory. We'd achieved our manifest destiny. We're sea to shining sea. Took multiple years of speech therapy for me to say that correctly in elementary school. We are sea to shining sea. I still have to kind of go slow on it, right? We achieved our manifest destiny. We got half of Mexico. Woo! Now, 11 years later, we're shooting each other. Something unraveled. Okay, something unraveled. Anyway, so analyze the different issues that led to the Civil War. Okay, there are multiple issues. Okay. It's inaccurate to say slavery is the only cause. It's also inaccurate to say slavery has nothing to do with it. The only reason you'd have those two opinions, either one of those, is you haven't studied the primary documents. Okay. And so, anyways, so there you have it. This is probably a little too long. Sorry. But there you have it. Could be longer. I never shut up. So, enjoy. Do you have any questions? Obviously, email me. Feel free to email me. You want more information? I mean, people, like I said, I like talking about history. I've had students visit me. One semester, I had a student every Wednesday after class. He would come and he'd want to visit for an hour. And my only condition was you got to be okay with me eating lunch, because it was the 11 to 12:20 class. I hadn't eaten in hours, if at all. I was hungry. So my only caveat was, okay, as long as I can eat. As long as I can eat while we're talking, and he was fine. I'm willing to do that, people. Anyways, if you want to come visit me, we'll make an appointment for my office, and, or we can do a phone call. The only reason I don't like phone calls is I'm hearing impaired. I'm deaf partially. So phones I'm uncomfortable on the phone. I prefer in person or Zoom. Heck, you want to do a Zoom meeting, a Zoom, or, we'll talk for an hour about history. I mean, it's fine. I like to do it. It's my job to do it, and I like to do it. What's funny is I won't do it on Twitter. I've told people on Twitter, history's my job. Okay. I'm on Twitter for fun. Okay. So I generally don't get involved in Twitter history debates, because I'm on Twitter for fun, not to get into an argument. So anyways, so have a good day, everyone.